On the 22nd of June 1941, Operation Barbarossa was launched. Over 3 million personnel of the Axis powers, the largest invasion force in the history of warfare, invaded the Soviet Union along a 3,000-kilometer front line with 600,000 motor vehicles. This offensive marked a massive escalation of World War II, which brought the Soviet Union into the Allied coalition. Almost a year before the invasion, on the 9th of August 1940, the German High Command issued the order Aufbau Ost, or Build Up East. This entailed the build-up of forces on the western border for an attack on the Soviet Union. Roads, railways, and airfields were constructed, the communication networks were expanded, and stockpiles of supplies and ammunition were established. The undertaking was implemented slowly and with great care, not to alarm the Soviets by the sudden appearance of large numbers of men and quantities of material and war supplies. Also in late August of 1940, Hitler ordered Generalmajor Walter Warlimont, Deputy Chief of Operations in the German High Command, to determine the location of Soviet troops in the western part of the Soviet Union. In further compliance with the directive, the organization TOD, the labor organization established and run by Reichsminister Fritz Todt, started to develop the logistical infrastructure of Western Poland, and preparations were started for the adjustment of the Soviet rail gauge to match the Western Europe. Moreover, the German High Command ordered the German military intelligence to intensify the activities against the Soviet Union and gather intelligence as to the Soviet armed forces and their locations. In early September of 1940, Generalleutnant Erich Paulus had started planning the coordination of the campaign against the Soviet Union. The German movements of troops eastwards got underway after, in early September, a deal was closed with Romania to dispatch a German military mission which was to instruct the Romanian army. In order to appease the Soviet Union, the German government declared that a large-scale military exercise was being held in the east. While in the west the fighting during the Battle of Britain reached a climax, the German military planners finalized their investigation into the problems of the campaign against the Soviet Union. The plan drafted called for 3 army groups. The northern group was to advance to Leningrad, the group in the center via Smolensk to Moscow, and finally the southern group was to advance to Kiev. Therefore, the army groups were named Heeresgruppe Nord, Mitte, and Süd respectively. However, the majority of the infantry formations wasn't motorized, and they had to cover the immense distances in the Soviet Union on foot. Moving supplies and artillery pieces was largely done by horses. Prior to the launch of Operation Barbarossa, the German army had 600,000 horses at its disposal. So Germany's main weakness was logistics. In the vastness of the Soviet Union, there were hardly any paved roads, and the Russian track gauge differed from that in Germany. Hence, the German army depended on captured Russian rail equipment for its supplies. Moreover, the diversity of German weaponry required a large maintenance and repair system. In the planning of Operation Barbarossa, this had hardly been taken into account. The Soviet plans for defense prior to the German invasion have been the subject of heated arguments and discussions for decades. Stalin had been informed about the imminent German invasion by dozens of sources, and it is therefore hardly imaginable that the Red Army was overwhelmed as it was in the early stages of Operation Barbarossa. There was, however, more than one cause for the disaster that struck the Soviet Union in June of 1941. This catastrophe was a confluence of events in which Stalin's personal intervention played a significant role. As early as January of 1941, agents of the GRU, the Soviet Military Intelligence Service, were collecting information on Hitler's intentions and German troop movements to the east. The NKVD also had its own department, which occupied itself exclusively with gathering information. This organization had established a vast network of spies in Nazi-occupied Poland and Czechoslovakia, and was well aware of the German buildup of forces on the borders. But identifications also flowed into Moscow from foreign countries as to Hitler's intention to attack the Soviet Union. From Washington, London, and Stockholm, Stalin was alerted to the German surprise attack in the coming spring. Later that month, secret war games were held to test the existing defense plans. They assumed that Hitler was targeting the rich grain fields and industrial areas in the Ukraine. General Zhukov was given the task to work out the defensive plan and to coordinate the required troop movements. In May of 1941, a growing number of messages was received in Moscow indicating that Hitler was steering towards war. On the 5th of May 1941, Stalin delivered a speech in the Kremlin to the officers, declaring a German attack in the near future could not be excluded. However, he indicated that the Soviet Union would do everything by diplomacy to have the Germans postpone their attack to the fall at least. If this would succeed, Stalin thought that the war would be fought almost surely in 1942 in much more favorable circumstances. That very day, intelligence services of the Red Army reported that 107 German divisions, among them 12 armored divisions, were assembling on the border. In the early morning hours of Sunday, June the 22nd, 1941, German artillery opened fire on the Soviet border. Communication centers, fuel and ammunition depots, border posts and barracks were targeted and mercilessly razed to the ground. During this barrage, German bombers embarked on their first missions to the east in order to strike Soviet airfields and cities. A few minutes later, the code word Dortmund was sent out on radio, signaling to the 3 million soldiers, 3,350 tanks, and 600,000 horses to launch the largest military operation ever undertaken by an army. Operation Barbarossa had begun, and with it the all-destroying, long, exhausting, and barbaric struggle on the Eastern Front. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you and see you in the next video.